A screech, a crash. The metallic scream of tires and glass tearing into the night. Ava jumped to her feet. Just ahead, under the streetlight, a motorcycle lay twisted against a lamppost. Gasoline leaked in a slow, shimmering pool beneath it. A man sprawled across the road, his helmet cracked open, blood streaming down one side of his face. Ava froze. The world blurred. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it echo. For a moment she wanted to run far from the sight of blood, from danger, from whatever this was. But the man groaned, a sound like pain swallowed by exhaustion. "Mister?" Her voice quivered. No answer, just the faint rise and fall of his chest. She inched forward, bare feet slapping against the wet pavement. The closer she got, the more pungent the smell of gasoline and metal became. The man's motorcycle jacket was torn open. His jeans were soaked with rain and blood. His leg bent at an angle that didn't look right. Ava gasped. Her small hands trembled. Oh no, oh no. She crouched beside him, eyes darting across his wounds. "Don't move, mister, please," he groaned again, barely conscious. Her doll fell to the ground as she tore at the sleeve of her sweatshirt, ripping a piece of fabric free. She pressed it against the gash on his forehead. "It's okay," she whispered, voice shaking. "You'll be okay." Blood soaked the fabric quickly, warm and sticky. Ava tried not to look at it. Her throat felt tight, her breath uneven. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. Blue, bright even through the pain. "Who?" His voice rasped, rough and low. "Who are you?" "Ava," she said, as if that name could somehow fix everything. "You fell, I think your leg's broken." The man coughed weakly, wincing in pain. His gloved hand reached toward her but dropped halfway. "Stay," he whispered. "Don't leave." Tears welled in Ava's eyes. "I won't." She looked around, no one. Just the empty road, a few dim lights from the diner windows. The world had turned its face away. Her pulse raced. She had to do something. "You need a doctor," she stammered. "I can get help." But his breathing hitched, and something in the sound, fragile, fading, made her kneel again. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, I'll stay. I promise." She pressed the torn cloth firmer against his wound. "Don't close your eyes, mister. Please." Rain began to fall again, thin drops at first, then heavier, washing the red from his forehead into tiny rivers that streaked across the asphalt. Ava's hair clung to her cheeks. She didn't move. Somewhere a car passed but didn't stop. She clenched her jaw. "You can't die," she whispered fiercely. "You can't," the man tried to speak again. "Angel." His voice was barely there. "You came—" Ava blinked, her lip trembling. "You need to rest." His eyes closed. Panic surged through her chest. "No, mister, open your eyes." She shook his shoulder gently. "You can't sleep yet." He groaned softly but didn't wake. Ava looked toward the diner. The glowing red sign flickered like a heartbeat. She could run, call for help, but if she left and he stopped breathing. Her small chest rose and fell in a frantic rhythm. She pressed his jacket tighter against his chest, whispering, "It's okay, mister. I'll be right back, I promise." She grabbed her doll, tucked it under her arm like armor, and sprinted toward the diner. The bell above the diner door jingled sharply. Warmth and noise rushed at her all at once. The hiss of a fryer, the clink of coffee cups, the low hum of an old jukebox. "Please!" she cried, voice breaking. "Someone help! There's a man outside. He's hurt bad." Heads turned. Forks paused midair. A waitress froze, notepad in hand. An older man near the counter frowned. What kind of hurt? "He crashed his bike. He's bleeding." For a moment, silence thickened the air. Then a man muttered, "Probably another scam." Ava's chest heaved. "I'm not lying," she shouted, voice cracking. "He's really hurt, please." The waitress hesitated, glancing at the cook, who shrugged. "We can't just—" A young clerk behind the counter, barely older than a teenager, set down the coffee pot. "Where?" he asked. Ava blinked, hope flickering in her wide eyes. "Down the road." "By the streetlight." He nodded, grabbing his jacket. "Stay here," he told the others. Then to Ava, "Show me." Ava's legs were trembling, but she led the way. Rain slicked the street as they ran. Her sneakers slapped against the wet pavement, her doll bouncing against her side. When they reached the crash, the clerk gasped. Holy hell, he knelt beside the man, checking for a pulse. He's alive, he said quickly. Call an ambulance. I don't have a phone, Ava cried. He pulled his from his pocket, already dialing. We're on Route 14 near Jackson Diner. Adult male, severe head injury, broken leg. Ava knelt again beside the biker. I came back, she whispered, touching his hand. His eyelids fluttered. Told you'd come back. Her heart squeezed so hard it hurt. You'll be okay now. The clerk covered the man's leg with his jacket. Kid, you did good, he said softly. If you hadn't found him... Ava didn't answer. She just kept holding the man's hand as the wail of sirens began to rise in the distance. Red and blue lights flashed against the wet street as the ambulance pulled up. Paramedics spilled out, moving fast. Male, mid-40s, head trauma, compound fracture, the clerk shouted. Ava backed away, hugging her doll as they worked. One paramedic looked at her and smiled. You found him? Ava nodded silently. You saved his life. Her lip quivered. Will he be okay? We'll do everything we can. They loaded him onto the stretcher. The doors slammed shut. The ambulance pulled away, siren echoing down the empty street. Ava stood still, soaked and shivering. The clerk placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Hey, you okay? She looked up at him, tears cutting clean paths down her dirty cheeks. He called me an angel. The clerk smiled softly. Maybe you are, kid. Rain drizzled over the city for 2 straight days. The puddles on the pavement had turned into mirrors, reflecting the grayness of everything above. Ava sat on the steps of the diner where she had last seen the ambulance lights disappear. Her doll rested on her lap, its fabric still stained with dried blood. She hadn't slept properly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the man's face, pale, bloodied, and calling her Angel. She whispered to herself, You said not to leave. But I did come back, mister. I came back. The waitress from the night of the crash opened the diner door. Hey, sweetheart, she said softly. You've been sitting here since morning. You need to eat something, Ava looked up. Her voice was small, like a broken whisper. Do you know where they took him? The waitress sighed. Hospital on the hill, St. Mercy's. Ava's eyes lit up for a moment. Thank you. She stood, hugging her doll. The waitress started to say something, but the girl was already running down the street, her sneakers splashing through puddles. The hospital loomed large and cold, a giant of glass and steel that seemed to swallow the sky. Ava hesitated at the doors, watching people rush in and out, families carrying flowers, nurses pushing wheelchairs, men in suits checking their watches. She didn't belong here, but she pressed the doll to her chest, took a breath and walked in. The smell of antiseptic hit her like a wall. Machines beeped in distant rooms, voices murmured, and shoes squeaked on polished floors. At the reception desk, a woman in a blue uniform looked up from her computer. Can I help you? I'm looking for a man, Ava said. He had an accident on the road. A motorcycle. He's hurt badly. What's his name? Ava's small face scrunched with thought. I don't know. But he has blue eyes and a broken leg. He called me an angel. The nurse blinked, a flicker of pity crossing her face. Sweetheart, there are a lot of patients here. You can't just, please, Ava pleaded. He told me to find him. I promised I would. I'm sorry, honey, the nurse said softly. You can't wander in here without an adult. I'm not lying, Ava whispered. He needs me. But before the nurse could respond, a security guard appeared beside her. Hey, kid, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Come on. You can't stay here. Ava backed away, clutching her doll tighter. Please, I just want to see him. Just for 1 minute. The guard shook his head. Rules are rules. Tears welled in Ava's eyes, but she turned and ran before they could stop her. She found a bench outside the hospital and sat there, the cold seeping through her clothes. The sky was the color of dirty steel, and her breath came out in white puffs. People walked past, talking, laughing, living. None of them noticed the little girl sitting alone with a ragged doll, her eyes filled with heartbreak. Why won't they believe me? She whispered to the doll. I'm not lying. I saw him. He called me his angel. She pressed her face against the doll's soft fabric and cried quietly until the daylight faded. By evening, the city had turned gold and gray again. Ava wandered down alleys looking for warmth. The wind bit at her fingers. She found a piece of cardboard and huddled behind a trash bin, the doll tucked under her chin. She thought of the man, his voice, his pain, his promise. And deep inside, where hunger and fear usually lived, a stubborn spark flickered. He remembered me. He will remember. Days passed. The world kept spinning, uncaring. Ava survived on scraps from dumpsters and leftover kindness from strangers. The diner waitress sometimes brought her a sandwich when she could sneak one out. But even kindness had limits. One morning, Ava stood by a newsstand, staring at the front page of a newspaper. Her heart skipped a beat. Tech billionaire Richard Hale in critical condition after crash. The photo showed the same man, pale, bruised, but alive. Ava's lips parted. "Richard!" She whispered the name as if it were sacred. Richard Hale. People crowded around, reading. "He's lucky to be alive," one man said. "Yeah. A billionaire like him probably has the best doctor's money can buy," another replied. Ava looked down at her doll. "He's alive," she said softly. "He didn't die." Then a thought hit her, a painful one. He was a billionaire, someone important, powerful, protected by walls and people who didn't believe girls like her could matter. Would he still remember her now that the world knew his name? That night, Ava sat by the hospital again. She watched the windows, hoping one of them hid the man who had called her Angel. A voice startled her. "You again?" It was the same security guard from before. He crossed his arms, frowning. "Didn't I tell you this isn't a place for kids?" Ava wiped her nose with her sleeve. "He's in there," she said stubbornly. "I saw his picture. He's the man I helped." The guard's tone softened slightly. "Listen, sweetheart, this is a hospital, not a playground. You can't keep sleeping outside." "I'm not going anywhere," she said, gripping her doll tighter. "He told me to find him. He promised he wouldn't forget," the guard sighed. "Kids like you shouldn't have to fight this hard." She didn't answer. The night grew colder. Eventually, the guard walked away, shaking his head. Ava stayed. Hours later, the automatic doors opened, and a tall woman stepped out, dressed in a black coat, her heels clicking softly. She was speaking into a phone. "Yes, Mr. Hale is stable," the woman said, "but he's asking for something unusual. A little girl who supposedly saved him." Ava's heart nearly stopped. She pressed herself against the bench. "Eyes wide, listening, yes," the woman continued. "We have no record of her. I'll look into it first thing tomorrow." Then she disappeared into the night. Ava sat frozen. Her heart felt like a drum in her chest. He was asking for her. He hadn't forgotten. She whispered, "I told you he would remember." The next morning, sunlight spilled over the hospital courtyard. Ava stood at the side entrance, watching as delivery trucks came and went. Nurses hurried in and out with boxes and carts. When no one was looking, she slipped through a door left ajar. The hallway smelled of bleach. Her sneakers squeaked softly. She kept her head down, moving like a shadow. A nurse turned a corner and nearly bumped into her. "Whoa, honey!" the nurse exclaimed. "Where are you supposed to be?" Ava froze. Her heart pounded. "I'm looking for him," she said. "The man on the motorcycle," the nurse frowned. "You mean Mr. Hale?" Ava nodded quickly. "He told me to find him," the nurse sighed, shaking her head. "Sweetheart, you can't just—" A voice interrupted from behind. "Everything okay here?" It was the same security guard again. His expression darkened when he saw her. "You again?" he said. "I thought I told you." Ava took a step back, tears filling her eyes. "Please, he asked for me." "He said he wouldn't forget." The nurse hesitated. "Wait, is this the girl?" "What girl?" the guard asked. "The one Mr. Hale's been asking about," the nurse whispered. The guard blinked, confused. "Are you sure?" "Not really," the nurse said. "But she matches the description," Ava's hope flared. "He's alive? Can I see him?" The guard rubbed his face. "I'll check," he muttered, clearly torn. He pulled out his radio. "Front desk, this is Daniels. We might have the kid Mr. Hale's been asking about." Static crackled. Then a voice replied, "Copy that. Sending someone down." Ava held her breath. Minutes felt like hours. Then the tall woman in the black coat appeared, the one from last night. Her expression softened when she saw Ava. You're the little girl? She asked. Ava nodded. I'm Ava. I found him. He was bleeding. I tried to help. The woman knelt, meeting her eyes. My name's Claire. I work for Mr. Hale. He's been asking for you. Ava's lips trembled. Can I see him? Soon, Claire said gently. But first, we need to make sure everything's okay. Come with me? Ava hesitated, clutching her doll. Then she nodded. Claire led her through a maze of corridors until they reached a quiet waiting room. Stay here a moment, Claire said, stepping aside to speak with a nurse. Ava sat on the edge of a chair, her doll in her lap. The world around her smelled of flowers and antiseptic. Her heart thudded in her chest. She was here, finally, but fear crept in. What if he didn't recognize her? What if he changed his mind? She looked down at her doll and whispered, He'll remember. He has to. Claire returned a few minutes later, her eyes softer than before. He's awake now, she said quietly. But he's weak. You'll have to be gentle, okay? Ava nodded quickly. I can be gentle. They walked down a hallway lined with large windows. The morning light poured through, turning the floor gold. Ava's reflection passed across the glass. Small, fragile, yet unbreakable. As they reached a door guarded by two nurses, Claire paused. Ready? Ava's throat tightened. She nodded. Inside, machines beeped softly. The air smelled of clean linen and quiet. And there he was, Richard Hale. Propped up against white pillows, his head bandaged, leg in a cast, tubes running from his arm. But his eyes, those same blue eyes, were open and alive. For a moment, Ava couldn't move. Richard's gaze shifted toward the door. When he saw her, his lips parted, disbelief and wonder flooding his face. Claire smiled faintly. She's here. Richard's voice was weak but steady. Ava. Her name in his mouth felt like music. Ava took a small step forward, then another. You remembered me, she whispered. How could I forget the angel who saved my life? He said, his smile trembling with emotion. Ava clutched her doll tighter, tears brimming. They wouldn't let me see you. I tried and tried. Richard reached out a shaking hand. Come closer. She crossed the room and placed her small hand in his. His skin was warm, his grip gentle but sure. Thank you, he whispered. You gave me a second chance. Ava blinked through her tears. You told me to find you. And you did. She smiled for the first time in days. If this moment touched your heart, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. Stories about kindness, faith, and second chances. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of the heart monitor. Ava sat in the chair beside Richard's bed, her small hands folded around her doll. She hadn't stopped staring at him, afraid that if she blinked too long, he might disappear again. Richard's eyes, tired but clear, watched her with the kind of attention she had never known before. Not the pitying glances of strangers. Not the suspicion of passers-by, but genuine care. He smiled faintly. You look smaller than I remember. Ava frowned. That's because I didn't eat much, she said softly. It's hard when you don't have a place. Richard's expression darkened, guilt flickering across his face. You've been on your own? Ava shrugged. People don't really like kids who don't have homes. They think we'll steal stuff. He wanted to say something, anything, to fix that reality. But how do you fix a world that had failed her so completely? Instead, he said, you won't have to worry about that anymore. Ava blinked, uncertain if she'd heard right. Richard continued. You saved my life. Ava, the least I can do is make sure you're safe. Her throat tightened. You don't have to, she whispered. I just didn't want you to die. He reached for her hand again, his fingers trembling but warm. Sometimes, the smallest kindness changes everything. Claire entered quietly with a clipboard in hand. Mr. Hale, your doctor will be in soon. She smiled at Ava. Would you like something to eat, sweetheart? Ava shook her head, clutching her doll. I'm okay. Claire crouched beside her. How about some hot chocolate? It's on me. That earned the faintest nod. Claire smiled and stepped out, leaving the room steeped in soft morning light. Richard watched Ava for a long moment. You remind me of someone, he said. Who? My sister, he replied quietly. When we were kids, she used to say the same thing, that helping people shouldn't need a reason. Ava tilted her head. What happened to her? She got sick when she was your age, he said, voice low. I was 12. I promised I'd make the world better one day, build things that help people. He gave a tired chuckle. Turns out I got rich instead, Ava frowned. Isn't being rich the same as helping people? He sighed. Not always. Money builds walls. You broke one down. The door opened again. This time a nurse carrying a tray. Breakfast time. She placed it on the table beside Richard's bed, oatmeal, fruit, and a steaming mug of coffee. Then she looked at Ava. You hungry, sweetheart? Ava hesitated. Richard nodded toward the tray. Bring her something too, please. The nurse smiled. Sure thing. When she returned, she set a small plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of Ava. Ava's eyes widened. For me? Of course, Richard said. You earned it. She bit into the toast cautiously at first, then faster, like someone afraid the food might vanish if she took too long. Richard's heart ached watching her. No child should eat like that. When she finally looked up, crumbs on her lips, she said shyly, Thank you, mister. He smiled. Call me Richard. For the next few days, Ava was allowed to visit for short periods of time. Claire made sure she had warm clothes, a clean blanket, and a place to rest in a nearby lounge. Nurses started recognizing her, the little girl who'd saved the billionaire. But outside those hospital walls, the story was spreading fast. Billionaire saved by homeless child, read one headline. The angel of Route 12, said another. Cameras began appearing near the hospital entrance. Reporters waited for quotes, hoping to turn tragedy into spectacle. Inside, Richard was recovering, his legs slowly healing, but he hated the noise. The way the world turned something pure into something profitable. One morning, he woke to find Ava sitting quietly by the window, watching raindrops race down the glass. You don't like the cameras either, do you? He asked. She shook her head. They scare me. Everyone's staring, like I'm not real, he nodded. That's how fame feels sometimes, she turned to him. Do you wish you weren't famous? He smiled sadly. Sometimes. But then I think maybe I was meant to meet you this way. Ava hugged her doll closer. I don't like it when people say you're rich. They look at you differently. They look at you differently too, don't they? She nodded. Yeah, only not in a nice way. If this moment touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe kindness still matters, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this. Later that day, Claire entered with a tablet in hand. You'll want to see this, she told Richard. He frowned as she showed him a live broadcast. Reporters were gathered outside the hospital, microphones flashing, words spilling fast. Sources confirm that the injured man, tech billionaire Richard Hale, has requested to meet the mysterious girl who saved him, said a news anchor. But as of now, her identity remains unknown. Claire muted it. They're asking questions we can't answer yet, Richard sighed. Because we don't want them to know she's homeless. Exactly, Claire said. If the media finds out, they'll turn her life into chaos. Ava, who'd been listening quietly, looked up. They already think I'm a secret, don't they? Claire knelt beside her. You're not a secret, Ava. You're special. But sometimes being special needs protection. Ava frowned. People only protect the things they want to keep. The line hit Richard like a punch. He looked at her, small, fragile, wiser than her years, and felt something shift deep inside. That night, after visiting hours ended, Richard was unable to sleep. The room buzzed with the faint hum of machines, but his mind was louder. He thought about Ava, her trembling voice, her stubborn courage. He thought about all the times he'd driven past kids begging at stoplights, too busy to care. For the first time, he wondered what stories he'd missed. He turned to Claire, who was working quietly on her laptop in the corner. Claire, he said softly, what happens to a child like her? Claire looked up. You mean homeless? He nodded. She'll end up in the system, Claire said. A shelter, maybe foster care if she's lucky. But kids like her, they fall through cracks, Richard. People mean well, but she deserves better, he said. his voice breaking. She does, Claire agreed. But you can't save everyone. Richard stared at the ceiling. Maybe not, but I can save one. The next morning, Ava arrived early, her cheeks pink from the cold. She'd been sleeping on the hospital bench again despite Claire's protests. When Richard saw her, he frowned. You slept outside again? She looked down. The guard said I couldn't stay in the lounge anymore. Said it's for families. Richard's jaw clenched. You are family, she blinked. What? He took a breath. I'm serious, Ava. You saved me. That makes us family now. Tears welled in her eyes. You don't mean that. I do, he said firmly. And I'm going to prove it. By afternoon, Claire had arranged a small room for Ava inside the hospital, a guest suite usually reserved for visiting relatives. There was a bed, clean clothes, and a window overlooking the park. Ava stepped inside slowly, her doll in hand. This is mine? Claire smiled. Yes, sweetheart, yours. Ava touched the bedsheets with wonder. It's soft. Richard stood in the doorway, leaning on his cane. Get some rest, Ava. You've earned it. She turned to him, eyes wide. You really mean it, don't you? You're not going to make me leave? He smiled. Never. That night, Ava lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in her life, she felt safe enough to dream. In her dream, she saw the road again. The crash, the rain, the blood. But this time the man stood up, smiling. He handed her a small glowing light and said, You saved me. Ava, now save yourself. She woke up crying softly, unsure if the tears were from fear or hope. Meanwhile, the outside world buzzed louder. Social media was ablaze. Some praised Ava as a hero. Others questioned the story's truth. Maybe it's just a PR stunt. Rich people always find ways to look good. Where's the proof this girl even exists? Richard saw the comments and felt a sense of unease. He called Claire. We're ending this media circus. No interviews, no statements. But the public, I don't owe them my life story. Especially hers, Claire nodded. Understood. Ava, unaware of the storm outside, spent her days by Richard's side. She'd bring him water, read from the picture books Claire bought, or hum softly while he napped. One afternoon, Richard woke to find her tracing the stitches on his hand. Does it hurt? She asked. Not anymore, she smiled. Then you're healing. He looked at her, truly looked, and realized she wasn't just healing him. She was teaching him what healing meant. If this moment warmed your heart, drop a key in the comments and tell us where you're listening from. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that remind us what it means to be human. The first flashbulb caught Ava by surprise. She was sitting on a hospital bench, eating a muffin Claire had brought her, when a sudden burst of white light made her flinch. Another followed, and another. Voices rose from the sidewalk outside. There she is! That's the girl! Smile, sweetheart. You saved a billionaire. Ava froze. Her hands tightened around the muffin until crumbs spilled onto her lap. Richard's assistant, Claire, rushed out of the revolving doors. Back up, please! She snapped at the reporters. She's a minor. No photos. But it was too late. Cameras had already captured the image of a small, disheveled girl clutching a doll with threadbare hair. By the next morning, the photo was everywhere. The billionaire's angel has a name, Ava. Homeless hero sparks national debate. Some praised her bravery. Others sneered at her appearance. Talk shows debated whether the story was real or fabricated. Ava watched the news from the hospital lounge, her knees pulled to her chest. She didn't understand all the words, but she understood enough. People were talking about her like she wasn't real. Why are they saying mean things? She whispered. Richard, sitting nearby in his wheelchair, clenched his jaw. Because they don't know you, and people fear what they don't understand. She hugged her doll tighter. They think I made it up. He wheeled closer. You don't have to prove anything, Ava. I know the truth. But everyone else doesn't, she said, tears welling up. They think I'm lying. He reached for her hand. Then we'll tell them together, when you're ready. Outside, the story was spreading like wildfire. Reporters camped outside St. Mercy's Hospital day and night. Drones hovered over the courtyard. Every hour brought another headline. Billionaire rescued by street child. Is this the real face of America's inequality? Public sympathy poured in, along with cruelty. Social media tore Ava apart and built her up again within the same breath. Some wanted to help her. Others wanted to expose her. Claire scrolled through the messages in disbelief. People are offering scholarships, homes, and hate mail, she muttered. Richard frowned. We'll protect her. She doesn't need the world's opinion. She needs peace. But peace had become impossible. That afternoon, a social worker arrived unannounced. Mr. Hale, she said firmly, we've had multiple calls regarding the girl's welfare. She's a minor with no guardian. We're obligated to investigate. Ava shrank behind Richard's chair, her small fingers clutching the backrest. She's safe here, Richard said, his voice sharp. Under my care. The social worker crossed her arms. That's not how it works. Until there's a legal arrangement, she's technically a ward of the state. She's not a case number, he snapped. Then file the paperwork, she replied calmly. Otherwise, we'll have to take her to a shelter. The air turned heavy. Ava's voice broke through the silence. Please don't make me go. I'll be good, I promise, the woman sighed. Sweetheart, it's not up to me. Richard's face hardened. You have 24 hours. I'll handle the rest. That night, the hospital room felt colder than ever. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, silent. Her doll rested limply in her lap. You won't let them take me, right? She whispered. Richard took her hand. Never. I gave you my word. She looked at him, searching his eyes for truth. People always say that, then they forget. I'm not people, Ava. His voice was low, steady. I'm someone who owes you everything. She nodded slowly, as if trying to believe it. The next morning, Claire arrived early. It's done, she said. We've filed for temporary guardianship. You're officially her legal protector until the court hearing. Richard exhaled deeply. Good. But peace was short-lived. A journalist managed to slip through security that afternoon. She approached Ava near the cafeteria, smiling too widely. Hi there, sweetheart. Can I ask you a few questions? Ava froze. Claire said I can't talk to strangers. The woman crouched, lowering her voice. I'm not a stranger, honey. I'm a friend. I want people to know your story. Tell them what really happened. Ava hesitated. You'll tell them I helped him? Yes, the journalist lied easily. And maybe they'll help you too, Ava nodded slowly. Okay. She didn't notice the hidden microphone. The article dropped the next morning. Ava's story. A homeless girl's plea for belief. The world read every word. Her quotes, raw, unfiltered, spread like fire. They didn't believe me when I said he needed help. People look away from kids like me. He called me his angel. Millions were moved. Millions more were enraged. Online trolls accused her of manipulation. Others called her a symbol of hope. The noise became unbearable. When Ava entered the hospital lounge later that day, two strangers were arguing about her. She's just a PR tool, one said. She's a miracle, the other replied. Ava stood frozen, invisible and exposed all at once. That night she couldn't sleep. She crept into Richard's room, climbing onto the chair beside his bed. He stirred awake. Ava, she whispered, why are people so loud when they don't know anything? He smiled weakly, because truth is quiet and lies echo. She rested her head on his arm. I liked it better when it was just us. He brushed her hair gently. Me too. If this story resonates with you, please share it. Because sometimes the quietest voices are the ones that change everything. The next morning, the hospital was in a state of chaos. Reporters had gathered outside again. The court had announced a public hearing for Ava's case to determine her placement. When Richard heard, he slammed his cane on the floor. They can't drag her through this circus, Claire sighed. They can and they will. The law has to verify custody. Richard looked at Ava, who sat silently in the corner, her doll pressed to her chest. He knelt beside her. We'll face it together, okay? She nodded faintly. At the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters shouted questions. Mr. Hale, is it true you're adopting her? Is this charity or guilt? Does the girl even exist legally? Ava flinched at every shout. Her small hand clung to his coat sleeve. Inside, the courtroom was hushed but heavy. The judge, a stern woman with tired eyes, looked between them. "Mr. Hale, you understand the implications of this request?" "Yes, Your Honor," he said firmly. "She saved my life. I owe her more than gratitude. I owe her safety." The judge glanced at Ava. "Sweetheart, do you want to live with Mr. Hale?" Ava nodded quickly. "He keeps his promises." A murmur rippled through the room. The judge's expression softened slightly. "That's a rare thing these days." She signed the order. "Temporary custody granted pending review." Ava exhaled a shaky breath. For the first time in weeks, she smiled, small, honest, and full of relief. Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in noise again. Reporters swarmed, microphones thrust forward. Richard's security formed a wall around them, but Ava still heard the questions. "Are you doing this for publicity? Will she inherit your fortune? Is she your daughter now?" Ava pressed closer to him, whispering, "Why are they so angry?" He looked down at her, because kindness confuses people who stopped believing in it. That evening, they returned to the hospital. Richard was exhausted but lighter. The legal storm had passed. For now, Ava sat beside his bed, tracing circles on the blanket. "Does this mean I can stay with you?" "Yes," he said softly. "At least until they make it permanent." Her eyes widened. "Permanent?" he smiled. "If you'll have me." Her lips trembled. "You mean, like family?" He nodded. "Exactly like that." Tears spilled over her cheeks before she could stop them. She climbed onto the bed carefully, hugging him as tightly as her little arms could. "Then I already do," she whispered. Outside, the rain began again, soft, steady, forgiving. The city buzzed on, indifferent. But inside that hospital room, two souls who had found each other in chaos sat wrapped in something the world couldn't name. Something small, fragile and unbreakable. If this moment touched your heart, take a breath and remember, sometimes the people who have the least to give end up giving the most. And if you believe in kindness, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this one. Snow dusted the city rooftops like powdered sugar. Holiday lights blinked in distant windows, but the hospital's glow was softer, warmer. Inside, Ava stood by the window, watching her breath fog the glass. She had been living in the guest room for 3 weeks now. Each morning brought a new routine: breakfast with Claire, reading lessons with one of the nurses, and a short walk down the hall to visit Richard. It was more structured than she'd ever known. Yet, deep down, she still waited for someone to tell her it was over, that she had to go back to the streets, back to invisibility. "Penny for your thoughts?" Richard's voice, steady now, drifted from behind her. Ava turned. He was walking, slowly, leaning on his cane, but walking. "You're standing." She gasped, her eyes bright. He smiled. "Doctor's orders. Light exercise." She ran to him, stopping just short of hugging his waist in fear of hurting him. "You look better, Mr. Richard," he corrected softly. "You can call me Richard, okay? Richard." She tested the name, as if it were a secret she could finally keep. They spent that morning together in the hospital garden. Winter air bit their cheeks, but the sun was kind. A fountain trickled somewhere near the benches, half frozen. Ava watched the water run beneath the ice. "It's like it's trapped but still moving," she said. Richard smiled. "That's a good way to put it. Do you ever feel like that?" she asked. He looked at her, surprised by her insight. "More often than I'd like to admit," she nodded. "Me too." Their walks became a daily ritual, two figures in mismatched worlds, learning each other's rhythms. Richard told her stories about his childhood, growing up poor, building his first computer from junkyard parts, and dreaming of changing the world. Ava told him about shelters, about sleeping under bridges, about how she used to count stars when she couldn't sleep because stars didn't judge. "You know," he said one day, "you're the bravest person I've ever met." Ava frowned. "I'm not brave. I didn't want you to die. That's what bravery is," he said quietly. She tilted her head. "Then I guess, maybe I am." Meanwhile, the world outside had begun to soften. The noise was fading. Public opinion shifted. The story of a little girl saving a billionaire had become a symbol of hope. A charity foundation started by Richard's company began raising funds for homeless youth. Still, There were critics. "Rich man redeems himself with pity project," one headline sneered. But Richard didn't care. He wasn't chasing headlines anymore. He was building something real. He'd begun the paperwork to become Ava's permanent guardian. When Claire brought the documents for him to sign, Ava watched with wide eyes. "What's that?" she asked. "This," he said, "is a promise on paper. Like adoption?" "Something like that." She blinked. "You want to keep me?" Richard smiled. "If you'll let me." Her face crumpled into tears before she could stop it. "Nobody's ever wanted to keep me." He knelt, slowly, carefully, and rested his hand on her shoulder. Then they didn't know what they were missing. If this moment touched your heart, take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe every child deserves to be seen, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that matter. A week later, Richard was discharged from the hospital. Reporters gathered again. But this time, security kept them at a distance. Claire led Ava through the private exit where a black car waited. She clutched her doll tightly, her eyes darting nervously. "Are they going to follow us?" "Not where we're going," Richard said, smiling. "Where are we going?" "Home." The word sounded impossible, like something out of a storybook. The car wound through quiet suburban streets, lined with trees wrapped in soft yellow lights. When they pulled up to a modern glass house nestled beneath tall oaks, Ava gasped, "This is your house?" "It's our house now," Richard corrected gently. Inside, warmth greeted her like a memory she didn't know she had. The scent of cinnamon and clean linen filled the air. She wandered through the living room, her fingers brushing over bookshelves, framed photos, and the polished piano by the window. "It's so big," she whispered. "Do you get lost in here?" "Sometimes," he said with a chuckle. "But not when there's laughter." Ava turned, smiling shyly. "I can laugh. Then we'll never get lost." That evening, Claire brought in dinner, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and warm rolls. Ava stared at the plate as if it were art. "Is this all for me?" "For both of us," Richard said. "But you go first." She ate slowly, savoring each bite. "It's the best thing I've ever tasted." Richard laughed softly. "That's because it's made with butter and peace of mind." She frowned. "Can you taste peace?" He nodded. "If you pay attention." Ava tried another bite, eyes closing. "Yeah, it's there." After dinner, she explored her new room. The walls were a soft cream, and the bed was covered in a quilted blanket with tiny embroidered stars. On the nightstand sat a small lamp and a framed photo, a printout of the picture the newspaper had used of her and Richard. But this time, the caption read, "The Angel Who Stayed." Ava ran her finger along the edge of the frame. "Is this really me?" "It's you," Richard said from the doorway. "The girl who changed everything." She climbed onto the bed, pulling her doll close to her. "Then I guess I can stop running now." The next few weeks unfolded like the slow opening of a flower. Ava started attending a nearby school under Claire's care. The first days were hard. Whispers followed her down hallways. "That's the billionaire's girl." She used to be homeless. She pretended not to hear, but every word stung. That afternoon, she came home quiet and withdrawn. Richard noticed immediately. "Rough day?" She nodded. "They said I don't belong," he sighed. "Kids can be cruel when they're scared of something they don't understand." She looked up. "Then why aren't you scared of me?" He smiled. "Because I've already seen who you are." Her lip trembled. "Who am I?" He leaned forward. "You're Ava, the girl who didn't run when everyone else did." She blinked, then nodded slowly. "I think I like that version. If this story reminds you that bravery doesn't always look big, hit the like button and tell us what you believe courage means." As spring crept in, the garden outside the house began to bloom. Ava planted her first flower bed under Mrs. Ellis's guidance, the retired teacher Richard had hired to help her with lessons. "They're called forget-me-nots," Mrs. Ellis explained. Ava smiled faintly. "That's perfect. Why's that?" "Because he said he'd never forget me." That evening, she waited for Richard to return from a company meeting. When he arrived, she ran to him holding up a small blue flower she'd picked. "For you," she said. He took it carefully. "What's it called?" "Forget-me-not," he laughed softly. "How could I?" But life wasn't all simple. Some nights she woke crying, haunted by dreams of sirens and hunger. Each time, Richard came to sit at her bedside until she calmed. "Go back to sleep," he'd whisper. "You're safe." One night, she whispered back, "Do you ever get scared too?" He paused. "Every day. But not when you're around," she smiled weakly. "Then we're both brave." Weeks later, Richard stood before a crowd at a charity gala, the first he'd attended since the crash. Cameras flashed, and the murmuring crowd waited for him to speak. Ava sat in the front row beside Claire, swinging her legs nervously. Richard began, his voice steady, but heartfelt. "3 months ago, I thought my life was ending on a cold stretch of road. But then an angel showed up, not with wings, but with courage." A hush fell over the room. She reminded me that worth isn't measured by wealth or power, but by compassion, and that sometimes those with the least give the most. He turned toward Ava. "She saved me once. Now it's my turn to make sure the world never forgets children like her." The audience rose in applause. Flashbulbs popped like tiny fireworks. Ava ducked her head, blushing. Later, when the crowd thinned, she ran to him. "You said nice things about me." "I just told the truth," he said. "You made them see me," she whispered. He smiled. "You made me see myself." That night, as they drove home, the city lights blurred into ribbons of gold. Ava rested her head against the window. "You know what's funny?" she said sleepily. "What?" "I used to wish someone would find me. But maybe I was supposed to find you." Richard looked at her through the rearview mirror, eyes glistening. "I think we found each other. If you're still watching, and this moment touched your heart, let us know where you're listening from. And remember, sometimes angels don't fall from the sky. They walk barefoot down broken roads." Spring turned to summer, and the world outside Richard's glass house bloomed in gold and green. The once bare trees now danced with life, and the air smelled of jasmine and wet earth after rain. Inside, Ava hummed softly as she painted at the kitchen table, a swirl of blues and yellows on white paper. Her doll sat beside the paint cup, now patched and washed, its button eyes brighter than before. Richard watched her from the doorway, leaning on his cane with a faint smile. "That looks like sunrise," he said. Ava grinned. "It's us." "Us?" "Yeah," she said proudly. "You're the sun and I'm the sky. You make everything brighter." He laughed, a deep, genuine laugh that filled the house. "I thought you were the light." "Maybe we both are," she said, eyes twinkling. That night, Richard sat alone in his study, staring at a framed photograph of his late sister. He whispered, "You'd like her. She reminds me of you, stubborn, kind, too brave for her size." The desk light caught the corner of another frame, a newspaper clipping. "Homeless girl saves tech billionaire." He picked it up, studying Ava's small, fierce face frozen in time. It wasn't just a headline anymore. It was history. The following week, Claire approached him with a folder in her hands. "The final adoption papers," she said, setting it gently on the table. "All approved. She's officially yours, Richard." He took the folder, his fingers trembling slightly. "Ours," he corrected softly. "She's ours now," Claire smiled. "You did it," he exhaled, eyes misting. "No, she did. I just followed her lead." That evening, he found Ava sitting in the garden, the twilight painting her face in soft lavender. Fireflies blinked lazily around her. He sat beside her on the bench. "Ava, there's something I want to ask you." She tilted her head. "You're not sick again, are you?" He laughed. "No, sweetheart. I'm better than ever." He opened the folder and pulled out a sheet of paper. "This is the last part of our promise." Her brows furrowed as she read the top line, "Adoption certificate." "What's that mean?" she asked softly. "It means," Richard said, voice thick with emotion, "you're officially my daughter. If you still want to be." Ava blinked rapidly, her lip trembling. "I get to stay?" "Forever?" he nodded. "Forever." For a moment she didn't move. Then she threw her arms around his neck and sobbed into his shoulder. "I told you I'd find you," she whispered through tears. "You did," he said, hugging her tight. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to be found again." If this moment touched your heart, leave AI in the comments, because sometimes love doesn't arrive perfect. It comes just in time. When the adoption became public, the world buzzed again, but this time the noise felt different. News anchors spoke softly, rather than shouting. Commentators called it the most human story of the decade. From the streets to a home of light, Ava's journey. Social media is filled with the hashtag, "The angels are real." Even the judge who had presided over their first hearing sent a handwritten note. In all my years on the bench, I've never seen a verdict like this, not of law, but of heart. For the first time, the internet wasn't arguing. It was listening. But the actual change didn't happen online. It happened in quiet corners, in the diner where Ava had once begged for help, now renamed Angel's Place, where kids in need could eat for free. It happened in schools where teachers began keeping spare lunches, in shelters that hung her photo on bulletin boards, captioned, "Never ignore the small voice that asks for help," and in boardrooms. Richard's company launched a new initiative called Project Haven, a foundation dedicated to housing and education for street children. One afternoon, Richard and Ava visited the park across from St. Mercy's Hospital, the place where everything had started. The old bench was still there. Ava climbed onto it, hugging her doll, now with a new red ribbon around its neck. "Do you remember this spot?" Richard asked. "How could I forget?" she said. "It's where nobody believed me, and now." She smiled softly. "Now they do," he nodded, eyes glistening. "Sometimes it takes one voice to wake up a sleeping world." She looked at him. "Did I wake you up too?" He chuckled. "You did more than that, Ava. You gave me back my soul." Later that evening, they stood outside the diner, the same one where people had once turned away. Inside, a small crowd gathered to unveil a plaque above the counter. The waitress from that night was there, wiping tears from her cheeks. "I never forgot that little girl," she said. "We all learned something from her." The plaque read, "In honor of Ava, who reminded us that courage doesn't ask for permission." The crowd clapped softly. Ava hid behind Richard's arm, embarrassed but glowing. "If you're still here, remember, every act of kindness creates ripples you might never see, but they still reach the shore." A year later, sunlight filtered through the tall windows of a school auditorium. Children fidgeted in their seats as a teacher tapped the microphone. "Today," she announced, "we have a special guest." Ava, now dressed in a neat blue uniform, sat nervously beside Richard in the front row. The teacher smiled. "Please welcome Mr. Richard Hale and his daughter Ava." The applause filled the room. Richard stepped up first, speaking briefly about the importance of courage and compassion. Then, to everyone's surprise, he handed the microphone to Ava. She froze for a moment, staring at the sea of faces. "Hi," she began, voice trembling. I used to live on the streets. People didn't see me. But one day I found someone who did. And when he got hurt, I helped him. Not because I was brave, but because I was there." The audience was silent, spellbound. She continued, her voice growing stronger. "Sometimes being there is all it takes to save someone, and sometimes that someone saves you right back." The room erupted in applause. Richard's eyes filled with quiet pride. That night, as they drove home, Ava stared out the car window, watching stars flicker between city lights. "Do you think Mama can see me now?" she asked softly. Richard looked at her reflection in the glass. "I think she never stopped," she smiled faintly. "Then I think she's happy." Later, tucked into bed, Ava held her doll close. "Do you think people forget angels?" she asked. Richard, standing in the doorway, shook his head. "No, sweetheart. Angels don't need remembering. They remind us," she smiled sleepily. "I like that." As her eyes fluttered shut, he whispered, "Good night, my angel." The house settled into silence, the kind that hums with peace. Outside, the moon rose high above the trees, silver light spilling across the lawn like a blessing. Years later, the park across from the hospital had changed. A small stone bench stood beneath the old lamppost, engraved with words that had once been whispered in the dark. "Find me." I'll never forget you. In memory of the night, 2 lives were saved. Visitors often left small flowers there, forget-me-nots, blue as the sky after rain. Some came to pray. Some came to remember. But every so often, a child would stop and read the words aloud, wondering who they were meant for. And somewhere in the distance, in a house filled with light and laughter, a grown Ava would smile and whisper to her children. That's where my story began. Moral of the story. Kindness doesn't ask who you are. It simply acts. And sometimes, the smallest voice in the loudest world can be the one that changes everything. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment and tell us what you believe accurate compassion means. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because more stories like this remind us what it means to be human.